one of the topics that we hit on in our first lunch, where we talked about some of the commonalities that we have in our spiritual perspective. And it's our mutual crush on Joseph Campbell. And then this idea of the hero's journey, which is rich. It's a rich topic. I'm
Yeah,
excited to talk about it today.
yeah, absolutely. Very excited. I think this book, almost more than any other book, changed the way I saw the world. It sort of reframed my cosmology and helped me think of things differently than it, and it really cascaded across all my other, spiritual studies and journeys. So very excited to talk about it. So welcome to Sacredish.
Yes, welcome. Let's dive in and talk about it. So I think we both own this book. Here's my copy of it. I'm holding
Oh,
up. Let's see what your
I
cover
have
looks
the
like.
original.
Oh, okay. All
I'm going to
right.
judge you by your book.
So, yeah, published in 1949. So it's been around for a bit. But the thing that was groundbreaking about it, is that it, combined this Jungian philosophy with comparative mythology, and really it was the first time anyone had looked at this kind of story arc in such a unified way. And so, groundbreaking in that sense, and then obviously has amazing legs, has continued to be like the blueprint that people reference when they talk about narrative structure in movies or any kind of entertainment or literature, or your own life. So it's definitely proven to be durable. But I thought we'd start by talking a little bit about what it is and this idea of this monomyth, which is, I love that word, the monomyth, this overarching singularity kind of touchstone that we all can tap into.
Yeah, yeah. So just to go a little deeper on this idea of the monomyth, so you talked about, it's a comparative mythology study, right? And then identifying the similarities is where the Jungian piece starts to like get woven in with this collective unconscious. But, one of the seminal books in comparative religious studies, there's always a few people on the fringes doing it, but it really brought it mainstream. And this idea of a monomyth, right, or this common story, in more religious circles is called the golden thread. And if you look beyond myth and you look into the religious stories, or what is that expression? Other people's religion is your myth, and your religion is their myth. Anyway, you start to see again what they call the golden thread. So very eye opening in finding that beautiful commonality. And wouldn't it be amazing if this book could have a even bigger resurgence to remind everyone that, listen, we're all human beings on the same journey. We're struggling with transformation, and finding higher consciousness. And can't we just cut a break, give ourselves a break, and give our neighbors a break, and find the commonality and similarity instead of always trying to find our differences? I think I would champion its resurgence today. I think that would be a tremendously beautiful thing. But yeah, this idea of the monomyth, and another piece of it that really jumped out for me was the circle, right? And making the circle this powerful symbolic visualization of life in the meta, but also life in the micro, which was just such a powerful just a way to think about life and how it moves forward.
Yes, very cyclical. We've talked about that before. And I think, too, this idea of, we're going to talk about the hero's journey as like dealing with, this call to adventure, or like these external elements to navigate, but that it's also mirrored with this process of internal development.
Yeah.
And how that inner human development manifests in like the physical realm in action, etc. So those two things definitely go hand in hand the way Campbell outlines it. And I think, it was just the perfect timing for that convergence in terms of someone to come in and draw those parallels and kind of establish this viewpoint. And I will say, we'll talk about it, but I do want to talk about the a more female-centered lens for
Of
it as
course you
well.
do. Of
Because
course you
I've
do.
got to do that. I'm a good
Just
old
more
feminist.
Divine
Yes.
Feminine Part 4, perhaps 3.5, maybe.
Hey, it's every episode. No, but I will say this book has sat on my shelf since the late 90s, maybe. And I don't know the last time I opened it. And I opened it and started flipping through it again. And I thought, oh, this reads like it was written in 1949. And I think in the late 90s, I just had a really different perspective. I mean, so anyway, I'm eager to talk about that as well. But before we can talk about maybe a modern update on it, I think let's dive into what is the hero's journey and what does it look like? What's it made up of? So, do you want to talk about, this idea? I think, we talked about the Jungian basis of this, like, that there's a collective unconscious and that there are archetypes, and these archetypes represent story characters. And definitely you see that with Campbell. He takes these and talks about the hero and then people relative to the hero, like a mentor, a goddess, etc.
Yeah, well, maybe to your point, the hero is a great place to start because
Yeah.
who's the hero? Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
you. It's
Of
me.
course.
It's all of us, right? It's not, you think hero and now we think movies. And as you mentioned, like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, that's all based on the hero's journeys, right? But we're the hero. We're the one that has to dare to leave the familiar, face the unknown, die to self, and return transformed. And that is the hero's journey. And we all do it. Sometimes we do it weekly, yearly. Sometimes it takes a lifetime. But we are the hero. And I think Bill Moyers or somebody was asking, Joseph Campbell, why did you write about this? He's like, well, it's the most important thing. Like, it's the only thing worth talking about. If we're, fundamentally, this hero story is the most important thing. And to your point, it's physical, it's psychological, and it's spiritual. As you think about the different ways that it can manifest in your life. And I think feel personally, it's shown up for me in those, three different ways for sure. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, we you don't live on this planet very long without experiencing some kind of challenge that you have to rise to or navigate or figure out. And so, if you have this framework in your mind, I think it is helpful in terms of, I don't know, understanding it as a process, but then also understanding how universal it is. It makes you feel less alone, even though the exact circumstances might be slightly different than someone else's.
Yeah. Well, we were teasing even before we started recording. It's like, I feel the descent. I feel like when you can see the landmarks and the guideposts coming and you're like, oh, do I hear a call? Am I getting shoved out of the nest again?
Yes.
It does really help, which is, I think, an important role of myth in all of our lives today. It is those guideposts for us to know, oh, turn here, don't turn here, and most importantly, this quote has stayed with me from the moment I read it. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek, right? And that is the promise for the hero on the journey. And trying, as I've joked about being control sober for how many years now, it's like, okay, I'm going to trust that I feel the descent. I'm going to trust that in this cave, there's going to be a treasure that will be worth the loop, worth going through. As you mentioned, the challenges. There's always suffering, right? There is suffering, but there is rebirth on the other side. And if we're not constantly changing and evolving who we are, what are we here for?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's this idea that we're trying to integrate the conscious and the unconscious. We're trying to become like a complete, mature, fully realized person. And so sometimes it can feel like, oh my gosh, another cycle. When do I get there?
Please, please. It's like, I hope I had a good time in a previous life because I sure am getting schooled in this one,
You're like, oh, what am I here to learn? Evidently a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, this idea of like that, we encounter these trials as opportunities, that we can rely on allies to navigate these trials. Like this whole process, has some purpose, right? It's just not like responding to random chaos. Like there's some structure to it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So the departures, shall we talk about the call and
let's
the
do it.
departure? That's sort of the
The
first.
call to adventure. I
Hmm.
love that. I love that phrasing. But yes, it's
Yeah.
where, as a hero, we're invited, to leave the ordinary world. And then, then the question becomes, are we going to heed that call or not?
Yeah, right. And the call can be a purpose that you're pulled towards, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be that you literally get pushed, when young men were conscripted into the army. Like that's not an adventure anybody wants, but here you go. So it can be something you seek, it can be something that's forced upon you, right? But there's peril in not answering the call, right? Joseph Campbell talks about what ends up happening is if you don't follow what is a positive momentum in your life, then it becomes negative. It'll turn in on you, and in a way you'll become the victim, because you haven't answered, you haven't risen to the call. And I don't know how many people you've met in your life where they're like, well, I felt like maybe I belonged over there, but I was afraid to go. Or I think I missed my calling as an XYZ. I joke I missed my calling as a dermatologist because everyone I see, I'm like, hey, I got a cream for you. But I tease. But there's a lot of people who just really aren't living the life that they feel they're called to live. And they're not happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As you said that, I was like, are any of us? I don't know.
I think.
That does sound like a high bar, the call, but I think it can be, it can be in a more like, I don't want to say mundane, but real world, everyday circumstance. It could be like, related to your job, or, a decision that you need to make that's fundamental about where you want to live. There are things like that, that you can apply the same, structure to, for sure.
Yeah.
But
Well,
this idea that you might have some hesitation, some resistance to that
mhm,
is definitely baked into it. There are examples of Star Wars is the one that's always so easiest to lay over this because it's so literal, but where Luke resists the initial call and wants to feels his
mhm,
obligations at
mhm.
home, etc. So, it's not surprising. It can be even instinctual to resist the call, but there
Yeah.
are ramifications to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's biblical. You see it in lots of mythology, and where it's like, what, who, me? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not equipped. I'm not
Yes.
equipped for this call, right? And another part of the call that this is one of my biggest struggles is discernment, right? Am
Mm-hmm.
I am I really getting a call, or am I just bored? Or am I running away from something? Or
Mm-hmm.
so kind of trying to think through what is just, superficial, psychological Susan, like just trying to like navigate emotions versus, oh no, like this is a call. And the comfort for me is a call won't go away. A
Mm-hmm.
call will keep coming back. It'll circle around another way. It'll circle around another way. Um, and so,
Well,
mhm.
I was just going to say, one thing I always love to say is, um, if you don't make the call will get made for you. So sometimes if you resist that call over and over and over again, it will eventually either become so uncomfortable for you to stay where you are, that you'll have to make the decision, or it will be taken out of your hands, right?
Yeah, amen to that. And like I'm the worst because I crave adventure and change, but at the same time, I don't. There's certain things I don't want changing, and I have been in positions in my life where I am miserable, and I know I need to make a change, but I won't do it, and it gets made for me, and it gets made for me, and
Mm-hmm.
every time that happens, when I get to the other side, I'm so grateful. I'm just like, oh my god, like what was wrong with me? Why did I tolerate XYZ, or why did I do blah blah blah? Um, but yes, there is also comfort in knowing that you'll get a good little shove if you need it, right? Like that at some point you may waste some time not answering the call, but you can get, pushed out.
Yes. And once you're committed, that's when it gets interesting. Because in the hero's journey, once you're committed, you usually somebody shows up to help you. A
That
mentor, some kind of person who is this magical helper that helps you commit to whatever it is you need to tackle.
Yes, that is probably my favorite part. At least right now, I have different favorite parts over the decades. I've had different favorite parts. But right now, that's my favorite part, which is the supernatural aid that comes your way. So, the better angels rise to meet you. And it can be in like Celtic lore, it can be an animal that guides you somewhere, it can be a dream, it can be a vision, it could literally be an angel that appears to you. It could be a friend that shows up and gives you what you need. But there's just this element of when you let go and let God, or you release and trust the universe, whatever language resonates, then forces conspire to support you. And I have seen that happen to me in my life so many times, so many times. I just don't know why I don't trust it more now. Why do I still struggle sometimes? But um
Yeah, I think it's interesting the idea that it can show up as your intuition, to your point of a dream or a feeling, and like, can you trust it? Are you going to trust it? I have a very literal example. Most of I've had a lot of change in my life related to my career. And at one point, I was trying to figure out what I needed to do, what the next step was. And I literally, as I was waking up one morning, it was a weekend, I heard a voice. This never happened to me before. It's never happened since. But I literally heard a voice that said, "You need to go work for yourself." And I opened my eyes, and it was just as clear and as plain to me as it could be. And uh, I thought, wow. I mean, that's my subconscious just getting to the point. It's not giving me like any metaphors, like there's no interpretation to be had here. This is it. So, yeah, it can come in a lot of different forms. It can be someone that you meet at a very advantageous time who opens a door or presents another perspective. Um, but yeah, that's the fun part. This supernatural aid that kind of
yes. Yes.
pushes you on your way.
I do, because I do believe there's more than our senses see, without a doubt. And so many experiences, you know, um in so many different forms. And when I chat with some people and that's just all nonsense to them, I'm like, no, you got to open yourself up to it. You have to at least be willing to recognize it when it appears. You don't have to go looking for it. You don't have to fabricate it. But so many people, just that part of their psyche or whatever you want to call it, they just will not believe, right? They just won't even open up the door to believe, and miss so many opportunities. I'm like, hey, did you not understand what just happened here? Like, you were in a pickle and a stranger, an absolute stranger, just came to your rescue and now has pushed you in a new and they're like, oh well, shit happens. I'm like, no, that's not, that was like, you don't understand, that was like divine, that was divine. Are you kidding? It's just such a much more magical, beautiful world, when you can see that and enjoy that and appreciate and be open, just to really be open and not stuck in kind of the mundane world in which we live.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think a lot of people are used to ignoring their intuition. And I would say I went through a specific phase of life where I ignored my intuition until I couldn't any longer, because I like to think of myself as a very rational person. We're going to talk about the heroine's journey in a second, but I think that's also part of like, um, you know, this distrust that you might have for like feminine intuition. So, because of the culture that you're raised in. So, All to say, something aids you, like moves you down the path, and then you start to encounter, like the beginnings of leaving this familiar world, or leaving the world you've known, or leaving a comfortable situation, and you enter into the unknown and danger. And honestly, I think that a lot of people live their entire lives refusing the call because it is scary to enter into the unknown.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And for those who haven't seen the visualization of the hero's journey, like it is literally a circle. You start at the top. The top is the ordinary world, the known. The bottom of the circle is the extraordinary, unknown world. And you literally are making your descent. You have to answer the call. There's, I think, as many as 12 stages, but I don't know if we need to talk about all 12. It's kind of really four big chunks, right? So you got to answer the call, and then you start your descent. And you're moving down into the unknown. And that's where the supernatural aid shows up. But there is struggle. It's not easy. It's not a pleasant journey. Like there is the purpose of the journey is transformation. And transformation never feels good. Rarely does it feel good. You're being pushed in ways that you're not comfortable with as you start to like make that descent into what is genuinely unknown.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not going to be comfortable. And that phase two is, initiation. So it's trials, it's challenges. Um, it will inevitably involve victories as well, as you meet these challenges, and um, you know find it within yourself to navigate them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
successfully.
And once you cross the threshold, there's no going back, right? A lot of the mythology you hear of, they descended into Hades, right? Or ascended towards the sun. It's like that's symbolic of that kind of transformation that's happening. And you have to go on the journey at that point. You can't turn around and go back. It is a one way, it is a one-way road. And the question is, how long is it going to take you to make the circle? Right? In terms of embracing this unknown. And again, I think some people don't realize when they've crossed into the threshold, when they've crossed the threshold and they are now in, it's just fear. It's so easy to get consumed with fear that you're missing what's happening, to your point. Like you're missing sometimes it's only in hindsight that you realize that, supernatural aid was given to you. Like you don't even recognize it in the moment. And like you said, tests, right? And challenges. Um,
Yeah.
Transformation happens through trial, unfortunately. If we could just sit here and say, I want to be transformed, that is not how it works. That is not how the human condition um, actually works.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, discomfort, fear. As you said that, I thought of the great quote from Dune: "Fear is the mind killer." So how you don't let it consume you, how you deal with it and wrestle with it so that you can remain functioning. And in Campbell's structure, to your point, there's like 17 sub steps, but this was the section where I was also, as I was like flipping back through it, this is where I thought, this is so from the male perspective, because he has like meeting with the goddess, where the hero encounters some personification of unconditional love or ideal beauty. And then there's this woman as temptress, which, the sirens in Odysseus are a great example of that, right? Where the hero faces temptation, etc. So some of the language that Campbell uses is definitely of its time, and this idea of like, it's very masculine, like this idea that there's like some confrontation or atonement with a father figure, etc. So anyway, that was the section. As I flipped through, I was like, oh. And I remember when I originally read it, you know, like we lived in an even more patriarchal culture in the 90s than we do now, believe it or not. And I think that, to your point, when I read it, it was so eye opening for me that I didn't even read it with that lens. I read it as a human being, right? And probably some of that specific male-centered language didn't stand out to me as much. But yeah, there this idea of being drawn to love or beauty, being led astray by temptation, you know, having to come to some kind of reconciliation with some like kind of basic innate conflict that you have. You know, these are all steps to achieve this kind of first phase of enlightenment or expansion of consciousness, you know, and, you know, hopefully ultimately achieve whatever the goal was or whatever you're meant to learn.
Yeah, I mean, the female piece, right? Women traditionally are either like safe harbor, home, you
Right.
know, like rebirth, or sirens and tempters, you know, we're like
Yes.
on either end and rarely on the journey. You know, there are definitely exceptions, which is of course silliness. I think you know, because we often get crosswise on this female thing, and I know you're always surprised. And I was thinking, why does it not trigger me? And I think I got over it in high school when we had to read Thoreau, you know, because he's always like, man. And like, I think I dealt with it then. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm just going to use that as like, you know, humans. So for whatever reason, it doesn't trigger me. It doesn't trigger me as much. But anyway, but I hear your point about, you know, the goddess and the role that she plays in the absence of, you know, these hero goddess stories. Even Campbell himself never wrote a book on goddesses. The only thing that we have of his is snippets of his lectures that a woman compiled in a book. Right? So talk about being of your time, right? So
Right.
it's definitely, you know, applicable to humans. It's not a male condition, right? It's a human condition. And
Yeah.
I think women are heroes just by giving birth. Do you know what I'm saying? Like just
Yeah.
our physicality. I wouldn't want to be a man for anything in the world. Let them have their little stories. Let them you know what I mean? They don't even know. They don't even know half of what's going on here in the real world, you know? Um, but that abyss, right? So now we've moved through the threshold and
Mm-hmm.
we're in the actual abyss, right? Like that is a stage. That is, you are at the bottom of the circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
The bottom of the circle. And this is where your identity collapses. Right. So if we're in the physical, let's take it in the three pieces. So if you're in physical, this could be like losing a job or something really traumatic, like your physicality is threatened. You could be sick. You could have a death in the family. Like it's a real physical situation, right? And it can be, if it's psychological, it's where the ego starts falling apart and you're, who am I? You know, it's total midlife crisis territory, right? Like, what am I doing? What is the meaning of life? Right? Just full on psychological crises. And then spiritually, and this is my own take, this is not Joseph Campbell. I think there's, you know, your cosmology falls apart. You know how I feel about original sin. And I feel like original blessing will call you and it'll be the call that pulls you around the circle. And you go into this abyss of, wait a minute, what is the meaning? What is the structure? What is the gift? Right? And then you realize it's original blessing and you move out of this dualistic thinking and you're in this crisis of cosmology and then you realize, wait a minute, it's all good, and you come back with a transformed consciousness. So the circle, it can happen on multiple levels. It can be physical, be psychological, and it can be spiritual. I know I got a little ahead on
No, and often intertwined, right? Like it's probably existing on all those planes because you know what we experience physically impacts us emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, etc., you know, and vice versa. You know, anxiety and stress cause true physical impact. You
yeah,
know, it's
yeah.
all interrelated. um, but if we do make it through these trials, tribulations, kind of the dark night piece of it, and we get to this point where we realize like the sacred gift, you know, original blessing. I love that idea. Then we have to return to the world, right? So we've achieved this state, and then and then we're called back to the real world. You know, and do we want to return? Maybe we feel a little bit of resistance there. Um, I went through a year that was really hard for me where my dad passed away. I got a divorce. It was all at the same time. And as bad as it was at the tail end of it, I probably had the best perspective on life and what was actually important than I've ever had in my entire life. And I was reluctant to lose that. But returning to the real world meant that I did a little bit.
Yeah.
I got kind of sucked back into just the day to day reality. So we might resist it, but then we've got to make it our way back. And so, that return journey can be dangerous. It can involve additional challenges as well, even once we've reached kind of that enlightenment moment.
Yeah. I mean, the quote that Joseph Campbell, the point is death, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
literal, but there's some element of personhood that's being burned away to reveal something better, right? And as the hero, you have to come back from this mysterious adventure, or you get to come back with some new power, some new insight. He called it a boon. You have a boon now, and you have to share it with your fellow man. That's part of what makes it heroic, is it's not purely selfish. What it is that you've learned can be shared to the benefit of others. So you survive the abyss. There's no trophy, there's no medal. There's more wisdom, there's more enlightenment, there's more consciousness, whatever word, whether, you know, sometimes it's self-knowledge, sometimes you come out with forgiveness, or there's a peace that you have that you didn't have, or a purpose that there's some gift that you get down there in the cave. um and to your point, it's easy to get sucked back into the world and all the demands, the return. The challenge isn't as much outside forces. It is, oh, I guess it is outside forces too, right? Like, it's so outside forces on the way in, outside forces on the way out. Okay, I still have to pay the bills. I still have to take care of my kids. I can't just move to a horse farm in Oregon. I've got to show up as an adult in the world. Um, but holding on to it internally is, to me, been the difference between having to make the same loop again and not having to make the same loop again. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's that internal compass that says, okay, I'm not going to let this go. I'm not going to let this go. What am I going to do to hold on to this? And whether it's journaling, or, as you know, how much I love meditation, it's like, those are the things. So, tools, coming out with tools aren't really part of the hero's journey, but I have found for myself that I really need them. And, Campbell, one of his quotes in the book is, the returning hero must survive what he calls the impact of the world, right? There is impact when you come back. Um, and it's
Yeah.
really hard to go back to the ordinary world. And when you see all that is around us beyond vision, and you come back to the ordinary world, it's a little disappointing. It's like,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like you've been on this almost high, right? And then you're coming back down to reality. And how do you integrate what you've learned into your ordinary life? To your point,
mhm,
it may require
mhm,
some tools for you to do that. And it's, probably the example that stands out to me is, if you've ever been on any kind of retreat, right? Like, some kind of spiritual retreat or meditation retreat or yoga retreat, anything like that, where you set time aside and you immerse yourself. You go to an ashram, you do whatever. Um, you set aside time and you immerse yourself, and maybe you reach this, kind of understanding, and then you come back and it's like, how fast does it dissipate? How do you hold on to it? How do you integrate it? And it won't be in that same form as when you discovered it, because you do have to function in the world. So, but how do you not lose it? I know, real world, boo, thumbs down. We we cannot recommend it. Um, Yeah, so that's it, that's the cycle. It is, the big circle that we navigate over and over and over again in our lives. And some people probably have more cycles than others, and we all move at different speeds, and everyone's maybe looks a little bit different at different points of their lives or overall. But it's that universality of the experience that's binding and reassuring.
Yeah, and I just pray for spiral dynamics, right? So going in a circle, but going upward, so that each time I retain a little more and a little more, a little more, and the circle's a little smaller and a little shorter, right, for me to get to the place versus going around the same mountain for what, 11 years or something crazy. Where you're just making the same loop and you're making the same loop and you're not progressing in any way or shape. And what is that expression? You just have to be open to it. You have to get rid of the life that you had planned in order to embrace the life that's waiting for you. And I think that's the hardest part. And I think just surrendering, just absolutely surrendering is terrifying, but it should be, I don't know, it should be peaceful. It should be exciting. Yet it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
Yes, I do. I will say the older I get, the less scary it is for me to loosen that iron grip a little bit when something like this appears, because you know that you've been through it and you've survived before. You've been through other challenges and you've survived. But yeah, it's. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to be comfortable. That's not the point. Um, all right, can I now talk about the heroine's journey?
Oh, yes.
Because I want to.
Okay, let's talk about
Okay.
heroines.
So I after I noticed that language, and to your point, like I don't think it's triggering for me as much as I think that I spent most of my childhood also just taking man and equating it to human being and saying this applies to me as well, for sure. Um, but I think that women have had to do more mental gymnastics historically to do that, and things haven't been as customized to like maybe what their path might look like. And so I just was like, I went down the path of, hey, did anybody develop like a female centered version of this hero's journey that kind of aligns with Campbell's? And actually, there's a woman named Maureen Murdoch. And in 1990, she, basically put out into the world the heroine's journey. And she was a student of Campbell. And she mentioned to him that his model didn't really address the female experience. And at the time, reportedly, he replied, women don't need to make the journey. All she has to do is realize she's the place that people are trying to get to.
Which now I know. Tell me how you feel about that.
So I think that it is meant as a compliment, that women are innately already centered in life more, maybe, but it also makes us not active, but just passive beings in a way. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I agree with him in one sense that I do think that women, I will say, not largely, vibrate at a higher frequency than men. I think we are already innately more attuned with divine realms. I'll just say that, right? I think it's just a gift, that we're given. Um, and I don't think that means we don't have our own journeys, our own heroes' journeys, but I do think that they are different. So when I hear that, I think, yeah, okay. And I honestly don't expect a man, as much as I worship Joseph Campbell, I don't expect a man to understand a woman's journey, right?
Fair. That's fair.
I
Yeah.
just genuinely don't. Like, it is rare. It is so rare to find a man who gets there. It's just a whole equal but different, but it's just a whole different ball game. And God bless them. It's just like,
Did you just bless their hearts?
I just bless their little hearts. And you know what? They have a role, and you know how much I do love men. But it's like asking a frog to know what it's like to be a lion. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's hard. It's hard. And what I struggle with is I don't, I don't like, I don't gravitate to women like Maureen. So bless her and move on. Like, yay for you, girl, who has to demonstrate and prove that what applies to men applies to women. I'm just like, just tell the woman's story. Just tell our story.
Well, and I will say, so I have not read the book. I will go read the book now because I just discovered it. Because I do want to know all about it. But I was curious if it was just, almost like a, instead of he, we say she kind of rendition of the hero's journey, but it wasn't. And I think this is fascinating on a couple of levels. Um, One, because it is distinctly different the way she outlines it, and um, and secondly, because I think it's also maybe not even a true heroine's journey because it's clearly influenced by this. And it was released in 1990, so published in 1990, so it's of its time as well. But it's through this lens of a woman existing in a very patriarchal culture. So like if you don't take that, if you take that off, it would be a different path or a different journey. So the way the stages she outlines are, separation from the feminine as like the first stage, identification with the masculine as like a woman adopts masculine traits, ambition, competitiveness to gain power, validation. And this resonated with me because I think that that's definitely like this how my career evolved given my age. Like you had to kind of blend in and adapt and adopt some of these traits that maybe were a little bit more masculine to get to where you needed to be. And then there's the road of trials. You achieve success but you don't feel spiritually connected or authentic, and then at some point you realize that there's this crisis or burnout or emotional collapse, and you realize that there's like this spiritual death or like this lacking that's somewhere in the middle of that. And then that's when you start to turn inward. You confront and navigate anything that's perceived as the repressed feminine. And you start to get in touch with more of your intuition, your unconscious, like kind of the core of your being. Um, and then you want to really, reconnect with that. And so you explore it, kind of the emotion, body mind connection, etc. If you need to heal like this mother daughter split, you do it. So that's very much like the flip side of this atonement with the father that Campbell talks about. So how you, whether it's symbolic or real, this reconciliation of the mother and your own feminine within. And then you heal this wounded masculine. So you take the healthy masculine energy and you integrate it within yourself to become more whole. And then, you achieve this like balance of energies and inner peace. So I thought that was it was an interesting lens on the journey because I do think it is different, and it's that idea. I mean, I definitely have experienced this, the separation from the feminine as like feminine being weak and something that I needed to like downplay or whatever, identifying with the masculine. And then, over the course of my life, coming to a better understanding of the power of the feminine energy that I have and how, it's something to be embraced and not something to be dismissed. So for me, it resonated just given where my life and my path, given the time I grew up in and the circumstances I grew up in and all those things, which, So thoughts on that? Do you hate it? Do you hate it, Susan?
I don't hate it.
Okay.
I can see some truth in it for sure, and I
Yeah.
absolutely can see, you know, it as a reflection of how woman moves through society.
Mm-hmm.
Can see because it's all about cultural influences and cultural realities and what does it mean to succeed in society. Um, I would need to read the whole book, which I'm not going to do, to understand if there's what's the spiritual dimension of it? You know, does it fall flat there? Is it more one dimensional in its telling? Sounds like there's maybe a little bit of psychology. Anyway, so, you know, I can see some realities in it for sure, you know, and what women, how you do have to sort of navigate the man's world.
Yeah. Well, I'll read it and I'll give you a book report.
You
I'll
can give
let
me
you
some
know.
cliff notes. You can highlight the good sections for me, and I'll just skip to those.
I'll say here's the yummy spiritual part of it, just for just for you.
All right, that would be awesome.
Well, so we talked to the point of spirituality, like as we talked about, there's, psychological basis for this. Obviously, there's this spiritual element to it as you look at like every single stage. Um, but at its core, it is all about this kind of spiritual transformation or insight, regardless of what the external circumstances are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it is raising your consciousness. It is Buddha consciousness. All things are Buddha things. And when you start to see the world that way, you realize that, you know, that's the real journey that we're on. You know, that's the real journey that we're on. And, you know, matter matters, but we're way more spirit than we are matter. Um, and opening yourself up to that consciousness and that transformation is, you know, some people like to call it earth school. Okay, you know, like that's the point of earth school is, okay, am I gonna transcend the matter? um and ultimately where you come back to is appreciation of the matter even more. Maybe that's another topic for us. Spirit and matter would be an interesting conversation to have, because that is definitely something I have wrangled with over the years. But yeah, but you know, all things are Buddha things, and to open up your consciousness and grow in that regard is why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, you know, it's a construct. It can feel like, oh, this narrative arc, it's this structure, but at the end of the day, it has this emotional center, right? And the reason that Campbell's work resonates with so many people is because of that emotional center and the fact that it mirrors struggles we all have every day. And it affirms to us that it's normal to feel challenged, to experience these challenging moments. And it gives us hope, right? That we can meet the call, that we can navigate it, and that we can come out on the other side with some kind of insight and wisdom and take control of our lives, right?
That's the plan, right? So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Where are you on the circle right now? Are you victorious at the top? Are you on a descent? Like, where are you?
I feel like I feel like have just completed a cycle actually, and am in a pretty good spot. Um,
You want to talk more about the cycle or?
yeah, I mean, for me, probably I have always, like I would say more recently, that challenge and cycle is related more to my career than it has to my personal life, because my personal life has been, pretty stable for a while now. Um, And I shouldn't say that. I'm going to knock on wood just as I said that. That was obviously tempting fate. But, I actually, just I'm 2 months into a new job. Uh, Things feel very orderly, and like I feel like I also just basically left in many ways a career that I've been in for the last 30 years, so that was a big transition. And took on something that's a little bit different in a slightly different industry, still has some parallels, and obviously skill sets that still apply, but for the first time took a job since I was graduated from college. This is really the first job I've taken that's outside of, kind of this realm that I've worked in for 3 decades. So that was a big change, and it was not one that I embraced for sure. And what happened was I kept trying to find ways to make that career continue to work for me, and it clearly didn't. And so I would, um, I had, a much higher turn rate in terms of moving onto a new opportunity than I would have in the past. And, at the point that I finally decided this doesn't work, I'm going to have to figure out something more different for my next role. I was able to look back at the last 5 years and say, well, of course that clearly that wasn't working. Look at all the times that I kept cycling through. It's like the cycle kept getting faster and faster and faster to just drive home to me. Yeah, you're barking up the wrong tree here. Like, this is where you've been comfortable. This is what you've known, but it's not working for you anymore.
Yeah. And have supernatural aid rendered itself? Has supernatural aid appeared to you?
Well, I don't know. You can say, I mean, I think that it is, to your point of being aware and open to opportunity when it presents itself. I went off and brainstormed on what I thought my next step would be, which would still be in the same, career type world that I had been in. And I had this realization that I just didn't want to do it. I had a plan. I had put everything together. And then I spent a weekend just sitting on it, thinking before I made calls and started putting things in motion. And I just realized I don't want to do any of this.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
You're so brave. Then you're so brave.
Despair. Now that was the pit of despair, because what good am I? This is all I've ever done. No one will ever hire me to do anything else. So I was researching things like how to become a blacksmith. I mean, like you name it.
You're like, I was like, oh my God, we need an intervention.
Yeah, you're like, she's losing it. But, I was reimagining my life. So you have to think
out of the
box, possibilities. And then, that day I went on to LinkedIn, and a good friend of mine who I hired him early in his career. He had posted a job, and I sent him a text message, and he said, yeah, let's talk. And boom, within 24 hours, there it was.
See, so. I mean, I've told you this, but I'm so proud of you, right? You made the hard choice. You did what your soul was longing for, even though it was very, very scary. And look what happened. Like, it's such a beautiful story for everyone to hear. And, you're my hero. Like, how many people would do that?
Well, I think some people do. And like I said, I didn't do it willingly. I didn't jump into it. I kind of had to be forced, but, and it has been great so far. So that's good. But, I do think that there is this, it has to become, your comfort, your kind of comfortable status quo has to become uncomfortable for you to abandon it. I don't know anyone there are probably a few people who are just like, on to the next, but most of us, would like to just stop and catch our breath for a bit and stay in the comfort zone if we can. So it has to heat up a little bit for you to start looking around.
Yes. Right.
How about you? Where are you on this cycle?
I think I'm at the top resisting the call. I'm at the top going, oh no, really? Do I have to do this? Like, I live in this, like, I don't even know what to call it. This unrealistic world of, I'd love to be a wandering aesthetic, right? Like, and the fantasy of what I want is so unrealistic that it's, I'm at the top right now, just practicing discernment, not stupidity. Hopefully that's where I am right now. And we've talked about this before. I am shamefully more fear motivated than I really want to admit to being. I am, on the one hand, very adventurous, but on the other, very risk averse. Mm-hmm. And that is my adventure is safe, like I'm going on a trip to the North Pole and my kids are all freaked out. And I'm like, don't worry. I'm paying a bunch of Vikings a lot of money to keep me safe and warm. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm like, it's going to be fine. I'm going to be just fine. so I'm in this weird place where, yeah, I'm resisting the call, and I'm telling myself I need more discernment.
Well, I mean, shaking up your base is hard. Adventures that are more for fun, it's a
Yes.
whole different thing.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think if you have like a functional life, you have some level of being risk averse, right? Because you want to make sure that like there's some stability in your life. I mean, there are people who thrive on chaos, that looks exhausting to me, but
Amen.
there are people who do it. So, some changes are harder to make than others. Some calls are harder to heed for sure. Um,
Yes.
but the nice thing is we all can relate because we've all been through versions of this. And to your point, like you have this ideal in mind that you would love, but it's not like my new job is like I'm like, oh, this is like my spiritual calling in my life. It is a great job and it lets me use my skills in a way that provides me with better balance for the rest of my life, and I love it. But it's not, I mean, I think that there's an in between your ideal and where you are now, right, that you'll find.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, eventually that's the plan, right? So
Yeah.
hopefully I won't get shoved. I tend to have to get shoved. Like, just to be honest, I tend to have to get shoved. And so, maybe there's a big old shove coming. And you know what? Girls got to do what a girl's got to do. And if that's just how it works for me, then that's just how it works for me.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Well, when I've been on the receiving end of the shove, sometimes it's almost a relief,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It often is. The times I've been shoved, kicking and screaming, shoved, right? When I get to the other side, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And, I keep saying it. What point are you going to nut up, Susan? Like, just do it. Just do it. And it's funny where you feel like, or if I heard you right, that, you feel like you've been through the cycle before and it's going to be all right, whatever. I don't know. I feel pressure of time more than I really ever have before, both in or kind of in the sense of, I'm over 50 now and I'm like, okay, I'm going to live to be 104. I've got 50 more, like I'm like, okay, I better hurry because the clock's ticking. And then I'm also like, well, I don't have as much time to recover. If I make a really bad choice, my runway to recover is smaller, whereas I felt more willing to take risks when I was younger. So I don't know. I don't know.
I'm not going to remember who this was, but I would listen to some podcast or watch something, and this woman said, um, "the whatever choice you make is the right choice because the point is to make a choice."
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think I listened to that podcast too.
whoever you are, lady, we remember what you said, but not who you are. Sorry. But
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, that's true because, yeah, I think we can second guess where things lead all day long. Um, but,
Yeah.
you know,
But on a little
if it
car,
doesn't work out, you can change course.
you can always change course, but if
Yeah.
back bringing us all the way back to the beginning, one of the things that I say to myself over and over again is the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. Right.
Yes.
And so don't
Yes.
be afraid to enter the cave.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Before we go though, I have to talk also about the villain's journey because
Oh, okay.
I was like, so this is the hero's journey. What does the villain's journey look like? So we can all identify the villains because I'm an Enneagram 8, so I gotta get this part in. So the hero may grow towards virtue. Villain is this descent into corruption, obsession, whereas a hero, rises to the occasion, right? So they face these challenges. It reveals your strength, your wisdom. A villain, it reveals their flaws, their ambitions, their fears, right? So the dark side of that. Heroes find allies, they find guides, they find people to support them. Villains, similar, but people who facilitate this dark path that they're going down, right? And literally every time I talk about this stuff, I think of Star Wars, because you're like, oh, this is Darth Vader, right? This enlightenment that the hero brings back to the world, the villain uses it for self and uses it to disrupt the world for their own gain, right? And whereas the triumph for the hero is this idea of transformation, for the villain, it's more about domination, revenge, or whatever this idea of success is, right? So the hero is meant to inspire us, and the villain is like our warning, right? Of what can, the flip side, the dark side of this path. So I don't know. I'm just saying there's probably a lot of examples in the world that we can apply this to, but just so you can identify the villains, guys. That's what it looks like.
They're not hard to spot. They're easy to spot.
Yes. So to wrap us up, to your point, yes, man, that cave, it has all the bad stuff and all the good stuff. So if our life is a story, we are the hero, and it doesn't have, like, this isn't a call that has to be dramatic or, huge. It can be just this cycle of your life as you navigate it and try to understand it and overcome these challenges or changes, right? And the idea is that these trials are what shape you and make you into the person that you are. And hopefully you grow, learn, transform, and then hopefully the world benefits from that, right? To your point of giving back.
Yeah. I mean, if you going through the villain's journey highlights anything, it's the difference between being self-centric and other-centric.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so that can be, like we've talked about, it can be leaving an unfulfilling job. It could be ending some kind of toxic relationship, whether it's a friendship, romantic relationship, whatever. It can be learning to speak up for yourself, and kind of own your own agency. But it's
help with, but not my problem.
You're like that. I already learned that in a previous karmic cycle. I'm good.
It's like we do the chakra meditations, and I'm like, you can skip the voice one, not a problem. We got other things to work on.
I was at an event one time, and they had like psychics that you could get like 15 minutes with. I sat down with one, and she said, her reading of me, she said, sometimes you're intimidated by people, but you need to learn to own your voice and all these things. And I just sat there and listened to her. And I was totally off base. I was like, you clearly don't have the gift. Because who she described was like my polar opposite, really. And so it was a kind of an industry event. And so I left and grabbed a cocktail and was talking to some people who had worked with me. And they said, tell us about your reading. And I told them, and they just started laughing. And they were like, clearly she's not legit.
Now you know. Now you
know. Yes.
That's so funny.
Well, cool. I think it's an amazing story. Obviously, it resonated with both of us when we were very young. And continues to be.
We lasses, we were so young in the 90s.
We were young and impressionable, and continues to be something that, we both refer back to, although clearly I hadn't cracked that book in a while, but I think about it often. And, these are our stories. Like, this hero's journey is your story and my story and everyone's.
That's right. It is the story. It is the framework, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe I'll answer the call. I'll let you know. If I call you,
I can't wait.
Call you in the middle of the night crying. I did it. What's wrong? Help me! Oh my God! What have I done?
I'm sure it'll prompt some great topiks for us.
There you go. Hey, my life is fodder for the podcast. That is why we're here, right?
It's true. Both of us.
All right. Well, it's been fun.
Yes, it's been good. We'll see you next time.